Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Uranio Paes.
And today we're talking to Leslie McDaniel, who is a very interesting self-preservation 4. And we're going to talk to her about her growth path with the Enneagram and also the work she does with the Enneagram as a practitioner. So welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, welcome. Delighted to have you, Leslie. And Leslie, in my view, has a beautiful psycho-spiritual development, and I'm pretty sure it will show during the interview.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Leslie, maybe a little bit about your background and how you came to the Enneagram.
Yeah, I never know where to start on that question. I've had a varied career path. I've done a lot of different things in my life. I would say the one consistent thread through all of that has been interest in myself, for better or worse. But interest in understanding myself, interest in kind of like growing, even when I didn't really understand what that meant on a deeper level, like psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. Um, but yeah, came to the Enneagram through just seeing personality type tests and things like that online. And of course, I'm always curious to learn something new about myself, as I mentioned. The Enneagram has kind of, I don't know if it's waned in popularity, but then it rises in popularity. And so the time period I came to it, it was really popular. Lots of um, people talking about books that were out and so forth. And so, yeah, I took a test and I initially met you at a different personality event. And you and I connected online, and I was leaning towards self-pres 4 at that time. And you helped me sort of narrow in on, yes, that seemed like the best fit for me. So that's
Right.
kind of
I
in a
remember.
nutshell how I came to the Enneagram and self-pres 4.
Right. I remember that typing interview very well. Yeah, that's great. And what did you start learning about yourself when you found yourself and you confirmed that you were a self-preservation 4?
Yeah. Well, I think the self-pres 4 itself is a little harder to understand. Well, maybe it's not harder to understand, but it's not what you think of as a stereotypical 4. So, which I know you've talked about probably many times on your podcast. But I didn't relate to a lot of the things that were said about 4s. I didn't feel highly emotional externally, those types of things. But when I understood that the self-pres 4 is someone who works really hard and holds in their suffering or holds in their emotion and holds in a lot of things in a way to suffer, consciously or not, or unconsciously. Um, I really started to see that in my life, like throughout my whole life, um, particularly the holding in of emotion and not letting it flow through and release. So that's been a big piece of understanding. And then also, something I think that is maybe not talked about as much, and you can share your opinion on this too, but what I've come to understand is that a 4, and myself included, likes to explore their identity, but also thinks that they have this unique identity. That's part of wanting, being able to be seen and that kind of thing. But the reality is there's a lot of adoption of other identities in that process. And it's really not authentic at all, even though it feels very, very authentic. And so that's been a really interesting piece to work through and to let go of. Um, I think the other big thing that I want to mention here is my relationship to myself. That's been a huge, huge piece of my growth journey, especially in the last couple years, um, of just accepting myself. There can be spikes of like uh, feeling better than, and then there's a lot of lows of feeling worse than, never on the same level as other people. And
Mhm.
so I really easily saw the times when I felt worse than. I had to examine the supremacy part, the part where I felt and saw the ways I was in which I was acting as if I were better than others. But the whole point of that is just that there's a rejection of self in that, because eh, there's always a comparison. It's never just me being
Mhm.
enough and being okay with my mental, emotional, physical states. So that
Mhm.
has been a huge piece. It's still a work in progress. It's an evolution. Um, but I think that, well, okay, I said that was the last thing, but one more thing on that. But I think, I guess the third piece is my spiritual connection. And I know you all have been present for some of that work as well in retreats I've been in with you. But as a four, understanding that holy origin means that I am always connected, no matter what I think and feel, um, or perceive. That has been a big thing too, because I always think something's missing there. Like, oh, I need to do something else, or it needs to be or feel different or better than it does, than my ego wants to tell me. So recognizing that has allowed me to really just relax in. And even if I don't quote feel the spiritual connection, to know and trust that it's there.
Mhm.
So yeah, I feel like those are some important pieces of my growth journey so far.
Yeah, really, really clear and important things that you're identifying. Really, really clear. Thank you for that. A couple things I want to highlight, and then I want to hear from you, Uranio. Just that I want people to really hear, because I think what you're saying is at a level of subtlety that I think people don't always get about fours when, it's not described by a four so clearly. I think one thing is like what you were saying, there's authenticity is so important to fours. And I like how you kind of pointed out this sort of, I think, thing that some people don't really get is that another thing that's happening for fours is this sort of focus on having a unique identity, like you said, an exploration of identity and a wanting to be understood in terms of a unique identity, and how you sort of pointed out that sometimes the focus on that unique identity leads to some inauthenticity that the four may not even realize is happening, instead of, like you're saying, just relaxing more and being who you are, and not needing to be in some way special or unique or having a particular identity, just more being who you are, and getting to know that, and how self-acceptance is such a big kind of overarching, really, really important goal of the psycho-spiritual path for fours, and how, like you said, it's a work in process, but the relationship with yourself. And again, I think in a way, I mean, we sometimes say fours are self-referencing, so unlike other types, um, who may not focus on themselves to their detriment, fours do focus on that relationship with yourself. But I like the way you put it, because there's a way that's the growth journey is having a better relationship with yourself. And in some ways, fours have as a kind of a part of what's good about fours is they are questioning that, they are looking to that, there is a natural sense of who am I, and how do I know myself more. But I like the way you put it, because it is about seeing where is a rejection of self, seeing how in that comparing mind of always being less than or better than or more than or different than, there is a kind of evaluation, a kind of judgment that is sort of always making something not okay or acting something out. And so I think that's really important. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is that holy origin is the holy idea, of course, of type 4. And I love the way you said that, your spiritual connection is also something very important on your path, as we've witnessed. And that this sense of always something being missing in some ways goes against the kind of experience of holy origin that fours are capable of, if they can see that ego tendency to always be looking for the thing that's not good enough, that's not working. If they can observe that and learn to not let that drive the show, it opens the way toward having a holy origin. And I like just trusting and relaxing in that space that you are connected, that that is your birthright, that that is something we all have, but that I think fours can experience in an especially beautiful way.
Hmm. Thank you. Yeah.
Would you like to comment anything, Leslie, before I also add a few things? Or
Yeah, I'll just say one thing about the self-focus. What I found about developing my relationship with myself is that my relationships with others have changed dramatically in that process in
Mm,
such a positive way. Like I always kind of felt like I was others focused, like I would do a lot for other people, but there was a wall or a distance. Of course, I'm always focusing on that anyway. I think is a heart type, the distance between me and other people, but I found my relationships and new relationships to be flourishing in a totally unexpected way since I've been able to accept myself better. And it's almost like the pressure to do all that introspection, which I still do, but to search for my identity, to find the pieces that I feel like are so special that need to be brought, like all, not all of it, but that pressure is so much more lower now.
Mm,
And it allows me to connect with other people in a more meaningful way.
mm.
yeah,
Excellent.
right. Yeah, so many important points that both you and B are raising about force. I want to explore a few with you, but listen from you if it makes sense or how you would describe it in your own words.
Yeah.
It sounds to, I really like what you say about the search of authenticity leading to inauthenticity, because
Yeah.
um, in a way, force bring inside content that is not theirs because of
Yes. Yeah.
comparison, but also because of introjection. So they tend to become who they are not, almost like neighbors of type 3 in the sense of getting, into something that they are not, but it because of different things, because of bringing inside what they think they lack after comparing themselves with others, and
Right.
by means of introjection, by bringing inside something, and that doesn't only create a bad sense while after, a bad sensation, because there is an incompatibility with between who I am and what I've brought inside, but
Right.
also it goes against the very personality strategy of being unique for who I am. Does this
Yeah.
make sense to you?
Absolutely. And that incompatibility you talked about, like that creates such internal like strife and tension and turmoil that I think was deeply unconscious for me. I didn't really understand that was the root of a lot of that discomfort that I felt inside with myself. So yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think it takes a bit, or at least for me, I'll speak for myself. It took a bit to understand that that was actually what was happening. Like I could understand taking in others' emotions. I would do that at times, or take it on, especially if it sort of pinged on something that was going on in me. Um, but I think the adoption of the identities and taking on a piece of it from someone else, like I would have never admitted that if I even knew it. But yeah, it's so contrary to what, um, yeah, that the ego, I guess it's true for everyone. Our ego strategies are the direct opposite of what we really need. And it's going against what's really, what's really needed inside.
We all, regardless of type, end up getting the opposite of what our personality tries to get. It's one of the tragic aspects of the nine personalities, not only fours. And yet, again, you guys brought up so many important points. I have a lot to say, but also want you guys to say stuff of course. And there is this thing that you said about relationship with others, having a wall, having this distance with others. And I'll ask you a more personal question about this in a minute. But it's like connected to the self-acceptance piece, I guess, and that has to do with something that many force say, like it's hard to feel I'm enough, and also hard to just you know feel that I'm enough in relationship to others. And with this, both sometimes superiority and inferiority complexes, and alternating between both. I don't know if I got you right.
Yeah. And I think something that's coming to mind as you say that too is that there's an energetic piece to all of this that m- me and another person may not be aware of that's happening when those fluctuations are going up and down and when I'm actually rejecting myself. They might not be conscious of that, but that creates that distance. and
Mm.
and I might, like, in certain relationships, like, okay, I have a push pull with relationships. It's either like, no way, like, here, I'm gonna, like, be conscious of pushing you away, or I'm going to be desperate in a way to want to connect with you, and then I'm like, why aren't we connecting? What's wrong? What That's the way it was before, without understanding this dynamic and understanding the ways in which I was rejecting myself. So how could I expect anyone else to accept me or to be able to get to know me on a truer level, especially if it's ego driven, when that what I'm presenting is filtered through the ego. It's not me.
Mhm.
So of course it's gonna always gonna feel lacking.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, makes so much sense. And I'll say, I do want to come back later to the holy origin and the spiritual connection, but I'll say just one more thing for now. And this is more personal. I hope you don't mind. In the very beginning, because you've been with us several times in retreats and more, in the very beginning, the memory I have of you is a little bit shy, a little bit insecure, uh, perhaps something around self esteem, and
Quiet. Yeah.
quiet,
Right.
very
Yeah.
quiet, harder time communicating, maybe, or believing that you would be able to make yourself understood. And now it must be very obvious to everybody listening to us how articulate you are, how easy it is to communicate with you, how um, present you are, and also your self confidence shows. So, what is the secret?
Well, first of all, I want to say I just have so much compassion for the person you just described. I have tears in my
Mm.
eyes because I love her, regardless of how she was showing up. Um, and I think what you're describing, I would have never said that I was shy, but I am a person who is more quiet and observational, particularly when I don't know if I fit in. It's all about the relationships and what other people are thinking of me, and whether or not how they're seeing me in the way that I want them to. So I think 100% self-esteem, insecurity. I think I've been pretty open about that too. I feel like throughout my life, like I've always felt extremely insecure, question myself, those kinds of things. Um, and I think that I have probably come across, maybe not in retreats, but to other people, as confident, more confident than I was, and it was not intentional. Um, but anytime that was reflected back to me, I was always like, yeah, well, it doesn't feel that way inside. It's like I don't
Mhm.
feel like a calm, confident person inside at all. That's the way it has been before. But now, yeah, I think there's a whole letting go of outcome type thing that I haven't talked about either, but just letting go of the desire to control what's happening in my world, how people perceive me. Um, how, yeah, just like what's going to happen. And that's not 100%, but that allows me to rest and relax and to be a lot more content. Like that's a word that I've never experienced contentment and the joy we were talking about before we started recording. Um, these are new emotions that I feel. So anyway, I guess thank you for that reflection and I appreciate the distance or the difference.
I love you brought up the word relaxation because it's something that it shows in you in the later retreats you've been in, but also just seeing you on video for the ones that are seeing you on video on YouTube now or video in other platforms, not only audio. It shows that you are beautifully present and relaxed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's something you're good at picking up on with people, Uranio, also. Not everyone kind of senses that, and so I think that's a particularly important observation because I know you tune into that very easily with
Yeah,
people.
and I think that with Leslie, it's both a physical relaxation and an emotional relaxation of
Mm,
not needing to, prove anything to others and being well with herself. And that for sure leads to joy. I think before we started recording, you were saying that you feel so much more joy in your life.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lightness, with everything we've been talking about. There it brings a lightness to me. And I'm not saying I'm always that way, but I feel that way the majority of the time, or much more that way than I've ever felt. Um, yeah, it's just a comfort that I'm going to be okay regardless of what comes my way.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I think the emotionality you mentioned, I have always felt extremely emotional internally, like emotionally turbulent. Sometimes that would come out, sometimes it wouldn't, but I have felt a much calmer um, in my emotions as well, like a much more evenness. And even if there is sort of a bump in that, I'm able to regulate so much easier now.
Yeah.
Hmm. Beautiful, yeah. And one of the things we're wanting to do in interviewing people who've been doing good inner growth work is really help people see the path from, when we first start working to much later. And so I like how Oranio highlighted what he was seeing in you. But I also love how you have compassion for the person that you've been in the past, and I think that's also a mark of really good self development work for a four who's accepting of yourself in the moment and also in the past and isn't sort of looking at what was wrong. It's sort of having compassion for who you are and who you have been and what your path who you've been all along the way. I want to say a couple. I want to just define introjection because Uranio mentioned that earlier, and so I want to make sure everyone understands that introjection is the type 4 defense mechanism. Of course, we all have many defense mechanisms, but introjection is associated with type 4, which is a kind of taking in things from the outside, from other people, often as an unconscious way to control the connection or to help ease the way to be able to connect with other people by kind of taking something on yourself. It's the opposite of projection. But I also heard you mentioned a type 4 pattern in relationship, which is a kind of push pull that we hear about. I wondered if you could say a little more about that, because I think that is very interesting for non fours to understand and sometimes hard for non fours to really understand how that works. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I don't know if I'll be able to explain it well, because I think it did take me a while to understand what was even happening there because I thought I was just trying to pull people towards me. I didn't really understand the push part, but it's essentially, I think the root of that is a dissatisfaction with what is. So whatever is present in front of me, there's going to be an egoic, when I'm driven by my ego, an egoic pattern to change that some way. And sometimes that might mean pushing someone away so that they can miss me and there can be distance and there can be, oh, I can think, why aren't they paying attention to me? Or, these feel like really icky patterns to be describing, but it's true. Or I can be want them to come close to me. And I think also another root of that, other than dissatisfaction, is some level of control, related to, um, yeah, feeling like I am the person who is sort of like pulling the strings here, in this relationship. Um, so I don't know if that helps, but it's just a pattern of that distance, expanding the distance and bringing the distance, closer. I think I've always said, and I think this is true for heart types, that I'm focused on that space between me and other people, and what's happening there. How far apart are we? How close are we? So this, push pull is just, it's messing with that space
Mm.
in an intentional or unconscional conscious way.
Right, right. And it's always important to point out that sometimes we don't know we're doing it, and it's only with really careful self-observation that you learn what that's about. And you're reminding me of at one of my first Enneagram trainings back in the mid 90s. I did a practice with a four in the group, a dyad kind of thing, where we were supposed to help each other understand each other's experience as our different types. And I'll never forget, I asked her, I said, "So do you focus your attention like on the other person or on yourself?" And what she said is, "I focus on the space between us." And I was like, wow, that that kind of blew my mind. That was so interesting. And I love the way you just described kind of, I'm focused kind of on, that space between us in a way, and what's happening in that connection.
Yeah. And even that, just as you're saying that, it comes up that that is a defense mechanism too, because I'm not looking what's happening at me. I'm not acknowledging the other person as their own complete self. Like yeah, it's interesting that when you brought that up, that just came to mind.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the tendency for being more self-referencing that fours have and looking inside. It's almost like the other one is there so that I can feel myself, like I come back to myself. And then when the type 4 person grows, the person is finally capable of, I can be with myself, but I can be with you and be outside myself, not only in my inner world. And that brings a beautiful experience. Some fours describe it as, oh, wow, it even feels like I'm seeing outside myself for the first time, right? Instead of, Gurdjieff, the main Enneagram pioneer in the first half of the 20th century, he would say that people in general need to start to learn how to do outer considering and not inner considering, as in not just stay in their inner worlds but seeing reality for what it is. Does this speak to you?
It does. And I think in relationship to what we were just talking about, I think this work allows me to fully see other people as their own beautiful selves, you know?
Yeah,
They're not, and this is deeply unconscious, but they're not an object, as you were
right,
saying, to refer back to myself or to
right.
reflect something to me. Um, and that's painful to think about that
Mhm,
happening,
mhm,
because I love people and I care about people, or at least I want to.
Mhm.
And I feel like I am able to do that more, authentically, deeply, truly now. And there's
right,
still work to be done there, but I think that is part of what has helped the relationship, um,
yeah.
stuff that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
love it, love it. I think you described it so well, and I want to come back to one point that you talked about, the fact that you are less emotional today, and we see that happening with fours who truly develop. They become more balanced. We can describe it as being like less oscillating, but in practice, they feel emotions less. And when you say this to a four who's still pretty much coming from emotions only, it feels like terrifying, or something that is potentially very boring, or something like that. uh, but when fours experience this, they learn how much they have been missing this inner state of peace, and just being with what there is, which is not only emotions, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I remember thinking back in some of those early retreats and classes I took with you all, I was like, that sounds incredibly boring and incredibly like why would I want that? I mean, honestly. It just yeah, it did not sound very appealing.
Hmm.
But it's interesting. Just recently, just within the last few months, I've had feedback that someone was actually comparing me to someone else, which is not a great thing to do to a four, but they were
Right.
comparing me to someone else and describing how much more emotional this other person was compared to me, and how they felt so much more. I think there was some ego involved in well as well for the other person, like it is for all of us, but it hurt at the time, I'll be honest, because I've done so much work to try to be like centered and calm. But the more I thought about it, I was like, well, that's actually exactly where I should be. Like that is like what this person is seeing while they're translating it differently. They're translating as like you don't have a heart, or you're not um emotional or whatever. The reality was I'm very much that way, but it's just calm and centered and relaxed in a way that, yeah, I don't think is easily read as emotionality, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, we all have the three centers of intelligence, and if we use only one, we are not complete, right? So, whenever a heart type, for instance, is only emotional, then there is something missing there, and so on.
Yes. Yeah. And body presence, I mean, the head stuff I've worked on too, but the body stuff has been so hard because I felt so disconnected from my body. And so I think presence work, which is still one of my number one priorities, being present and accepting what is, that helps too, just being really more grounded than I've ever been before.
Mm. I want to ask a little bit more about your subtype, the self preservation four, because I think, out there in the Enneagram world of other people and teachers who haven't, especially people who haven't followed sort of what we follow as the Claudio Naranjo sort of later subtype approach that we think is so profound and important. The self-preservation four is the counter type, and you mentioned before that you didn't always relate to some of the four traits, but some people out there that don't know this approach sometimes say there's no such thing as a self-preservation four, that this isn't really a four. But I really heard what you said that I think was so important when you talked about being very emotionally turbulent inside at times. I mean, of course, the growth passes is getting to a little bit more of a place of calm and peace for fours, all fours. But that you didn't always show that on the outside, and I think this is really important for people to understand about self preservation fours. It's not that they're happy versus other fours. It's not that they don't feel. It's that they feel a lot, but you hold it inside more. It's not, you don't share it as much. It's not like you don't wear it on your sleeve. You don't talk a lot about it. So I wanted to ask, can you tell us a little bit more about like what happens there when, what do you think is the mechanism or the motivation for kind of keeping it inside and not sharing it as much, or even being uncomfortable with sharing emotions to the extent that you have been?
Yeah, masochism. The mechanism is
Right,
masochism, and long
right.
suffering. And yeah, like when I understood that when I have an emotion and I don't allow it to process through and flow through and release, when I'm not doing that, I'm holding it in. I'm long suffering. I'm being masochistic. So that was really helpful. I think also there's this. I think there's sometimes it's called tenacity or tenaciousness. I think
Yep.
there's this desire, ego-driven desire to be really strong. To um, and I think showing that maybe at times could feel weak. or could feel like that's not the image or the presence that I want to have with other people. So I'm just going to hold it in. It's not that I'm not feeling it. I'm very much aware of it. It's just locked in,
Hmm.
which causes immense problems in your body. Like that's just
Right.
not not a good plan of action. I would not recommend it. Um, so yeah, that's been another thing of just like even just holding back tears, like anything like that where it's like starting to come and then it's like whoop, right back in, to
Hmm.
keep it all bottled up inside,
Mhm.
which is not healthy in any way. So yeah, I think it's a way of making myself suffer.
Right. And of course, all fours, a key tendency with all fours is a kind of attachment to suffering. Almost like my suffering is part of my identity or part of, what's special about me, or just part of what defines me. And I think for self-preservation fours, you just described it really clearly in terms of this masochistic tendency of I'm going to be attached to my suffering, but I'm also attached to kind of hiding myself, like to keeping it inside me, not putting it out, not asking for help, for instance, because I think sometimes sharing your suffering with others is a way of being supported or asking for help. And I think that's part of the masochism of we sometimes say self preservation fours are masochistic, social fours and sexual fours are more melodramatic than masochistic. But there is this kind of, I'm going to hold it inside to tough it out. And I think, like so many of the rest of these things, it's a survival strategy. And often self-pres fours got a message in childhood of like, don't show your pain, don't show your dark feelings, because no one out here wants to know about it. And it didn't help. It wasn't something that served in some way. It was sort of like a survival strategy to keep it in and be quiet. And there's also can be a little bit of a, like you said, a two-ish thing, a little bit more about the self-preservation for that's a little bit more about like being aware of how people are seeing you, and so maybe wanting the image of, okay, I'm not showing what's going on inside. But I'm saying too much about this, but is this making sense? And yeah.
Yeah, and for me it was an attachment to like a virtue of being strong, which I didn't realize that, but just
Mhm.
like just being a strong person in all
Mhm.
sorts of ways. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I also love all of that, but I want to bring us back a little bit to spirituality and when you mention holy origin, equanimity is the virtue for force, and holy origin is the holy idea for force, and these are central higher aspects of being, of our better self. And um, I remember to these days as if it was happening today, Leslie, when you felt your presence in a spiritual way so strongly, and I could resonate with that and witness that. And there was just joy about all of that. And I think that this is qualifies as one of those pivotal moments in our lives when we understand something out of experience that really resolves some limiting beliefs that we all have in our types. Like, I've always been connected. I've never really missed anything. I've always been seen and approved of by who really matters. Is this a fair description of that experience, and certainly what you have been feeling since then?
Yeah, the experience you're mentioning happened at retreat, and it is still in my mind. Yeah, it's something I reflect on often, but trying not to get attached to it in a way of like, oh, that was like the penultimate spiritual experience, because that could happen too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think in that moment, that helped me to not only understand the connection the spiritual connection that is connected to me, but also to everything around me, and how all of that is connected and it is one also. And
Right.
that is something that I think was really hard before, where I would
Right.
want to be an individual, but yet I
Right.
also didn't like feeling separated. Like there was a push pull there. Um, and I think that joy, yeah, it was just like, from sometimes you see your patterns and you think, how ridiculous is this? And so there, it was joy of the experience, but also just like being able to see all of how I had been operating, and still continued after that somewhat, but in a new light of just like, that doesn't make any sense. It's so ridiculous. It's just unnecessary, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
One of those spiritual realizations, right? It's just, witnessing what we couldn't see before.
yeah, yeah. New
Yeah.
eyes and more. I mean, that all this work has been about seeing with new eyes and having a much more expansive view of myself, of quote reality, of other people, of just how everything is operating, and being able to look at it from a higher view, higher perspective, myself included, and just see, oh, I see what's operating there at that moment.
Right.
Um, and being able to sort of like pull myself away from that and to see it with more neutrality and
Right.
understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. And when experiences like this happen, it inspires everybody around without us trying to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's bringing up something else that may not be related, but I think another thing that I have worked on accepting and understanding is the beauty of who I am, which is not just unique to me, it's to everyone, right? And I think understanding the ways in which I am beautiful, and just saying that out loud, that's the part I feel like can be really inspiring to people, is that acceptance again, that seeing myself in a new light. Um, those are the ways I want to inspire people. And if someone sees that and is like, what's going on with Leslie over there? Like, I'm happy to speak about that because I want that for them too.
Right.
Yeah. In some ways, the type 4 growth path is really beautiful because it leads from a kind of not feeling enough, or comparing oneself to others and feeling less than, and seeing what's missing and not feeling good about yourself, to a lot of self acceptance and peace and joy, and kind of an opening up to just enjoying who you are, and we really hear that in the way you speak about this. um, One question I have for you, and might be interesting for people: what do you think on your sort of path over the last years? What's helped you the most, in your growth path?
Mm. That is a question that I've tried to answer because I'm like, if I wanted to help other people in this, like, where do I, like, what are, yeah, I don't know. Like you mentioned earlier, or asked the question, what's the secret? I think probably for me, it's not necessarily one particular thing, but it's a commitment to the process, to the path, to doing the work, to going
Hmm.
to the retreats, um,
Hmm.
to starting again when I feel like I haven't done the practices that I know are necessary and helpful for me. Um, so yeah, and that's not, I mean, if you'd told me that several years ago, that that's what it was, I would be like, yeah, no, give me something else. Like there needs to be something more.
Mhm.
But I would say, yeah, just showing up, being a student of myself, continuing to try to see the patterns at play with neutrality, and not
Mhm.
being judgmental of them, not getting attached to them, not beating myself up over them, all the different things that can happen. But just being like, oh, okay. And then bringing in that lightness. And it's not like a linear thing. It's sort of all we've woven together, and different parts of the growth process come into play that help me to do those things at
Mhm.
different times. Um,
Mhm.
and it's kind of cool to see them all sort of like come together now in a
Mhm.
way that helps me to exist in an entirely new way, if that makes
Wow.
sense.
Wow, that's incredible. And I like what you're saying because it's something that actually can be good for everyone to hear, not just fours, right? Is that when you have that commitment, and it's in some ways it's a commitment to yourself. So I really love that, and I really hear that in so much of what you're saying, of like you're saying to keep showing up and asking the question, what is my work, and what do I need to lean into, even though it's uncomfortable and hard. So it makes a lot of sense. So I know that you all also work with the Enneagram, and I think among other things, I'd love to hear, especially when someone is on such a beautiful growth path as you are. It's like Uranio mentioned earlier. It's good to hear you're also helping other people on their growth path. Can you say a little bit about how you've integrated the Enneagram into the work that you do?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll answer this more holistically in that I've studied so many different things, different personality types, like different or systems, different frameworks of growth, that it all sort of like works together in the back of my mind as I'm working with someone. And I know
Mm,
even in some classes when I went through the professional training with you all, I did learn to type, to do Enneagram typing interview. But part of that process was trying to sort of like look at the developmental factors. I forget what they're called exactly,
mhm,
but that's kind of how I work with all the knowledge that I have when I'm working with someone. Now, if they come to me specifically wanting to know their Enneagram type, I can help them with that. But I'm actually way, way more interested in what's after that
mhm,
than that type label because I think type labels can be super helpful, but I also think they're if that's if we stop at that point too long,
mhm.
it can be really limiting.
Right.
So I like to listen to the person's story and use all of that knowledge, the Enneagram included, to kind of like also intuitively or with my spiritual connection zoom in on the piece that I may want to offer them. And of course, it's their decision about if that resonates or not. But the Enneagram's always in the background there working for me,
Mhm.
and helping me sort of like guide the person and speaking through the spiritual connection. I don't know if that makes sense. That probably didn't answer your question very clearly, but the way that it's working now is just it's all together there. All that knowledge is like a well that's available to me, along with the
Interesting.
spiritual connection guiding me as to which piece needs to be brought forward.
Beautiful. So it sounds like it's a real blend of different things, the Enneagram included, but also your intuition, and sometimes our intuition, of course, is formed, informed by the different things we know. So it sounds like and you sort of blend it together with other systems as well and kind of tune into what the person's needing in the moment.
Absolutely. And that requires me to be spiritually connected. If I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want it to be ego, like what I think the person needs to do, or um, I want to really pay attention and sense energetically and with all the other things of what is most important to present to offer to this person.
Right, right. And do you call what you do coaching, or is it something, what do you call it? Because it sounds
I
really
don't
good.
know, B.
The old dilemma, how to call this kind of thing we do.
Yes. I mean, that's a real question. I don't know. Like, I've been in a pretty big transition with my business over the last year, especially of trying to figure out how to present what I feel like I do and what I feel like my strengths are and how I want to help people.
Mhm,
And that's another part that I feel like is related to my growth path in that I am comfortable and I have the bandwidth to be able to wait to what comes across my path and what is
wow.
presented for me. Um, it's prior to this last year, it was super hard. I was like, okay, what's next? What do I need to do? How do I get this out there?
Mhm,
Da 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 da. Right. But now, and I'm finding it doesn't always present on my timeline that I would prefer, but things are coming up. And I think just relaxing into that process again, just knowing that it's going to come together in the right time. I don't really need to do anything beyond my typical work, staying connected, my inner work that is, um, staying connected and being present to what is unfolding.
Beautiful. I'm relating to you a lot around, I've also been focusing a lot on like spiritual development in the last years, and just some of the language you're using, it's beautiful. You can tell that you are really connected to spirit and doing that work, because I think it is a lot of times about learning to trust, learning to see what shows up, learning to open up. And especially, I think the way it dovetails with what you've said about your growth path, learning to be more accepting and living more from just who you really are, and not needing to be something else. Um, so that's really incredible. And I think I'm really also hearing about how just your being and your presence and your knowing and your, you know, occupying more who you really are, that in itself is really curative for people, and it really helps you open up to how to help other people kind of follow a same kind of path, even if it's not the same path.
Yeah, I hope so. That's what I'm trusting in anyway, that there is an energetic vibe, connection, something that people will be drawn toward if I'm the right person to work with them.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, well, you don't necessarily know how to call the work you do, but gladly you still have a website.
And there's some words there.
Yeah, and people who want to know more about that, just have a look at the description of this episode.
Yes, yes, we'll have your website and how people, anything you want to say about how people can get in touch with you or the work you do.
Just the website. I'm at hellopersonality.com, and I do have a podcast, the Hello Personality Podcast.
Right.
Started out as personality frameworks mostly, and now it's veering into this world that we're talking about. So that's an interesting transition if they want to follow along.
Excellent. Good, good, good. All right. Well, it's been a total pleasure, as always, talking with you and being with you. And thank you for sharing, some insights about your path, because I think it's going to be very inspiring to a lot of people and help us understand the self-preservation for which needs to be understood.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Lovely to have you here at the Enneagram 2.0 podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
So that concludes our podcast for today. We hope you'll join us next time for the Enneagram 2.0 podcast, where we talk about all things Enneagram.